Hello, everybody. It's the Historical Gamer once again, and today is the moment you have all been waiting for. Well, if I flatter myself, anyway. I'm sure many of you have not been waiting for this day, but it's an exciting day nonetheless. Today is part one of my, well, I guess technically it's part two, but really it's the first episode that we're going to issue any kind of orders in a brand new Let's Play series, a collaborative Let's Play series that I'm going to be playing with two old time YouTube favorites, two gentlemen I've had the pleasure of doing a collaborative series with in the past, and those individuals are Tortuga Power and XTRG. Now, the game you're looking at in front of you here is To End All Wars. It is a game made by Ageod, published by Matrix and Slytherin Games, and it is a turn-based World War I game that follows the Ageod sort of system. We are going to be playing a multiplayer game fighting through World War I with Tortuga Powered taking control of the Western Entente, so the Western allies, France and Great Britain, and anybody else who joins in the West, while I will be taking on the role of the Eastern Entente, fighting as the Russians and the Serbians up front, the Serbians down here, and then XTRG will be fighting as the Central Powers. So initially that's going to be Austria over here and the Germans to the north. So, as you can see here, we're at the very beginning of the war. It is early August 1914. In our first video, we did look at our war plans. So let's go ahead and recap that, just so you all know what we're going to be doing. If we go here, we can see there's some updates that have come through since our last turn, which was really just our war plan turn. They give us some updates on certain actions that have occurred. So Serbia has rejected the Austrian ultimatum. This is the historical result. That means the Serbian prime minister, after long deliberation with his government and other great powers, agrees to all the points of the Austrian ultimatum, except the demand to allow Austrian police and military personnel free reign in Serbia. Remember, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated by Serbian nationalists, and the Austrians basically put demands on the nation of Serbia to say, hey, basically give up your sovereignty and allow us to investigate, what would more or less de facto allow Austria to again, erase the sovereignty of Serbia. It would be a grave national security threat for the Serbians, so they rejected the ultimatum that the Austrians put forth, and again, that's what historically occurred. As a result, Austria will end up declaring war on Serbia. Serbia will then have Russia come in on its side and declare war on Austria. Germany will then declare war on Russia. France will then declare war on Germany and Austro-Hungary, I believe. And then, depending on Germany's actions, if they invade Belgium, that could bring the British into the war. So, again, classic snowball effect of the outbreak of World War I. If we take a look here, we can see the German war plan is told to us, so we picked our war plans in the last video. There's no secrets with war plans. No matter what you pick, the enemy's going to find out. That represents the fact that the Germans are mobilizing millions of men, the Russians are mobilizing millions of men. It's really hard to keep those plans a secret, and so we understand that the Germans are going to follow the historical Schlieffen plan. This was an agreement we had with XTRG. Tortuga and myself are both novices at To End All Wars, and XTRG is a bit more of a more hardcore grog. He's a little bit more in tune with this game. I'm very much a novice. So the thought was, let's give us every opportunity to try and make this game interesting. XTRG stick to the historical plans. Meanwhile, both Tortuga and myself have the ability to pick our own war plans. So XTRG goes with the Schlieffen plan. For those of you who know your history, the Schlieffen plan involves a massive German turning movement on the French, basically being on the defensive on the Alsace-Lorraine front, even ideally inviting an attack through here, although the Germans historically strengthened their force and attacked on both flanks, which was probably not wise, but I don't think it really affected anything. But anyway, the Germans sweep through Belgium, violate Belgian neutrality, which pulls in the British. They sweep around the French flank, nearly take Paris, but are stopped. Sort of this strong winged army of the Germans going through the light targets of Belgium rather than cramming through the heavily entrenched border with France in an attempt to envelop the French, take Paris, and destroy the French armies. That's the Schlieffen plan. The good news for us is that means the Germans keep their eastern front weak. So I believe they got one, maybe two armies in the east that are going to be facing off against us for the Germans. Now, that doesn't include the Austrians. We can see here the Austrians have also selected their historical war plan, that is the Conrad plan. Basically, what that means is Austria is facing off against Serbia and engaging Russia as a priority. So Austria is splitting its forces to deal with both Serbia and Russia. What that means is the Austrians are going to establish a general headquarters at Vienna under General Conrad, the chief of staff. 4 armies will be attached to the GHQ, and it will be fixed during August and September. During these turns, Austrian leaders in Russian territory will be active, and any Austrian units in Russian territory will gain a 30% cohesion bonus at the end of the turn. So the Second Army is in the process of transferring, appears in Budapest, must be transferred to the front. So I'm not sure, tells me that the Austrians get 4 armies. I'm not sure if that means they put 2 against the Russians and 2 against us, or what. If we go over to the Austrian frontier, we can see they've got an army in Krakow, and they have an army in Kazanaros, or however you pronounce it. So the Austrians have what looks like 2 armies here facing off against us that I can see initially. We can also see at least 2 Austrian forces, maybe not necessarily armies, but at least 1 army by the looks of it, facing off against Serbia. And that's the plan that the Austrians are going for. It's historical, and the Austrians suffered mightily in Galicia early in the war. They were driven back into the Carpathian Mountains. They were driven back into these passes where they were basically able to hold off the Russians. But the Austrian army was dealt some serious early defeats in the war that really limited their usability or sort of value to the Germans. As the war progressed, the Germans ended up taking up more and more of the responsibilities. Now, you may say, all right, the Austrians went with the Conrad plan. You're going to demolish them. Well, not so fast. And that's because we are going with a very different historical war plan for the Russians. We are going with, as you may recall, the Berlin plan. So what that basically means is we're taking 2 armies, and we're going to defend against Austria with those 2 armies. You can see here we've got the 4th Army here, which is locked into position near the Austrian border. And then we also have, where's the other guy? We also have what I believe is the 5th Army, which will be facing off. I think this is intended to be the 2nd Army dealing with Austria. So this is a little bit further from the border at Coel, and it is also locked in place. So we've got 2 armies dealing with the Austrians, basically trying to hold them in place. Meanwhile, the Berlin plan means that we are going to be focusing all of our efforts on Germany. The idea is to crush the German forces before they can take out France. Tortuga Power himself is also very much I wouldn't say novice, he's more experienced with Ageod games than myself, but he certainly is not to the caliber of XTRG. So the idea would be that I would launch an all-out drive on Berlin to attempt to take Germany out of the war early. You can see Berlin is very close to some of our armies, so drive on Berlin with all of our effort, while France stands on the defensive against the bulk of the German armies. And thankfully, because of the fact that the Germans are forced to follow the historical war plans, if you will, that theoretically it might be more possible. Let's see here. Exit back out of here. So that is our war plan. Meanwhile, the French war plan is Plan 19. This calls for an offensive against Germany, attempting to flank any German attempt to invade Belgium by sending 3 armies through Luxembourg and the Ardennes. So essentially, the French, rather than attacking headlong into Alsace-Lorraine, into these heavily defended territories, which then invites a German flank attack, the idea here is that the French are going to launch a flank attack on the flankers. So the Germans are going to try and flank the French are in turn going to try and flank the Germans. And what that basically means is they're going to launch a pointed attack through Luxembourg, and also through sort of northern Germany and southern Belgium to essentially hit the German advance. The Germans are going to advance through Belgium almost like a door, just sweeping through Belgium, trying to sweep down on Paris and around and crushing the French army as the door shuts. The idea with this is that the French will hit the German hinge on their attack, so the Germans will advance through Belgium. The French will attack on the hinge, knock the hinge off the door, cause the door to fall apart. This is an awful analogy, but it's what I'm going with. So essentially, drive through Luxembourg, cutting off the German force driving into Belgium, and destroying the German force north of the German border, thus allowing them to turn and advance into Germany at leisure. So those are the plans. The French are going to be sort of their all-out version of an attack, and the Germans are also going to be their all-out version of attack. The first turn of Russia is a little bit challenging. So we've talked about our strategy being an all-out offensive on the Eastern Front for the Russians, an offensive in the Western Front for the French, and trying to understand what that really means for us getting into war. Now, we're currently in early August, and what that means is the Russian Empire is still mobilizing. If we zoom in here, we'll see most of our armies that are facing off against Germany are actually locked in place. You can see here the 4th Army, for example, is going to be locked for 4 turns. Meanwhile, the 2nd Army is going to be available to us. The 1st Army up here is going to be available to us. Both these units are unlocked. But the army in Warsaw, the 9th Army, is locked in place for 1 turn. Or actually, no, 4 turns. Wow, that sucks. Yeah, the 9th Army. And then the army in Lutz, the 8th Army, which is going to kind of be, I think, our central principal army for the drive on Posen and Berlin, is also locked in place. This one's only locked in place for, I believe, 1 turn. And then the 3rd Army, which will provide some flank cover and also help for the drive on Berlin, is locked in place for 1 turn. So we've got these armies sort of assembling. Our armies facing Austria are also locked at the moment. They cannot move. They're sort of shadowing, if you will, the Austrians, but they're not going to be able to attack out against them. Both of these armies are locked in place. 1 turn for the 1 army and 1 turn for the other army. Actually, it looks like the 4th Army is kind of spread out with its base in Warsaw by the looks of it. Oh, wait, no, that's not the 4th Army. That's the 4th Army Corps, never mind. But either way, we've got 2 armies on the Austrian border locked, we've got 2 armies on the German border locked, and we've got 2 armies on the German border which are unlocked. So we'll hope that that we're able to effectively manage the offensive, but most of our forces early on for the first few turns are not things that we're able to do anything with. Now, real quick here, I just took a screenshot for no reason. One other thing that we have to consider is unlocking some fortress guns. So you can see here, if we click on this, there are a bunch of fortress guns throughout the Russian Federation here. As you kind of hover over this, you'll see this. There's a whole bunch of Russian forts that have guns in them. Now, if we're going all-out offensive, it might be nice to have those heavy guns to help reduce German forces. The Russians do not have enough light artillery, is my understanding, and they don't really generally their artillery is a little bit subpar. So one of the activities that we could take is we could go ahead and unlock these fortress guns to give our armies better artillery pieces. It's an important decision based on my understanding of the game, and that's what we'll see here. You can see here the effects would convert fortress guns into unfixed heavy artillery, which can be incorporated into your units on the map. It will cost 1 engagement point, 1 national morale, and 200 victory points. We must target a fortress containing fort guns in a region owned by your side and belonging to France, Russia, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Great Britain, Italy, and the US or the Ottoman Empire. It is recommended to only use this decision if dire need of artillery due to the lack of state funds, blah, 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 or due to time constraints. The cost and morale in VP makes it prohibitive to strip a large number of guns in this fashion. So it's certainly something that could be detrimental to us, but it also could be really useful to us. And the Russians have a lot of fortresses on their borders of their enemies that they could strip guns from. I'm not going to do it to a whole bunch of forts. I'm not going to do it to the forts that are bordering the Austrian Empire because we're going to be on the defensive there. But I do think it's worth considering doing in some of these other forts where we're going to be attacking from. So, for example, the Novogradac, or however you pronounce that, right near Warsaw, we've got 3 armies, or actually 4 armies, in and around this fort here, and our attacking forces are locked for a little bit, so it might be useful to do that. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and drag this over here, and we're going to go ahead and unlock the fortress guns of Novogradac. It's going to take, I believe, some time before those guns unlock. It doesn't look like anything happens there, but did I select Warsaw instead? In any case, we are going to unlock those guns. I assume it takes some time, but we've gone ahead and we've done that. So we're going to unlock those guns. These armies are all frozen in place anyway, but it will theoretically give us a better ability to strike out at the enemy. So that's going to be my big sort of strategic decision, if you will. We could do things like change the government. I'm not going to do that. State funds, which allows us to raise immediate capital, but right now we do have some money. You can see up here we have 479 state funds, 1,500 victory points, 2,100 conscripts, 94 tons of war supplies. We have no rail supply, no rail capacity, which is going to be detrimental to our ability to rapidly move forces around. 7 engagement points is what we started with. We just used 1, and 54 ammunition, which gets used as battles are fought. We could build a munitions factory, for example. It's going to take some engagement points, but we could do it. I don't think I can do it this turn, though. But in either case, I'm not gonna do it anyway right now. This is going to be more of a focus on the actual battle or battle planning, if you will, the operations planning for this particular video. And the description of the unlock artillery, again, made it sound like it was just one time. It says you can't do it multiple times. It's prohibitive, all of that. But anyway, guys, getting into our actual war planning here, you can see we've got a lot of troops that are locked. There's not a ton we can do in early 1914, but we do have 2 armies that are unlocked that we can do stuff with. That being the Second Army and the First Army. Now, these are the 2 historical armies that Germany defeated at the battles of Tannenberg and Masurian Lakes. The First Army, I believe, is what was defeated at Tannenberg, the Second Army at Masurian Lakes. The Second Army is located right near these lakes. The First Army is located near the border of Eastern Prussia. I am going to start moving these forces. Now, I realize that Russian troops are going to be, poorly supplied. I realize that moving some of our troops before the rest are sort of up and ready to go could be an ill-advised tactic, but I'm going to do it anyway, and we'll see how this pans out. My general principle is these armies are located in Eastern Prussia. My concern is the idea, once we get these other forces unlocked, and we'll talk about it more in later videos, but the idea is going to be to have the 8th Army drive in toward Posen. You can see there's a rail line that will allow it to drive straight to Posen, drive from Posen to Frankfurt an der Oder, and then drive from Frankfurt Frankfurt an der Oder, there's another Frankfurt to the west, and then drive from there into Berlin, taking the city. But to do that, obviously means extending a narrow frontier into Germany, which will be exposed to German flanking maneuvers and flanking attacks. The Germans have at least 1 army located in Eastern Prussia. Warsaw is already in a bit of a salient here. If we actually go here, you can see Russia here is in green, Germany is in gray. So we've already got a salient. We've got this long front we've got to defend. And if we want to extend that front all the way to Berlin, it wouldn't be too crazy for the Russians to sweep in and the Germans to sweep in, cut our forces off, and destroy them. So my general principle is going to be to do 2 things here. We're going to zoom in. We're going to use the 8th Army to drive on Berlin. It's also one of our strongest armies. We're then going to use the 3rd Army to also drive on Berlin, but to kind of guard the northern flank. These 2 armies are going to work in conjunction. So this army will likely move on Thorn and then sweep west on Berlin. While those troops are doing that, the Second Army needs to move north and west to guard their flank. It needs to protect these units' flanks. These units are locked for a little bit, so these guys can get a head start. They don't have a good course. They don't have a good path to doing that. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the Second Army. I'm going to advance it north. It doesn't have a clear supply line, so this is going to put it in a poor supply situation until it can get to Thorn. But I'm going to advance it north, and then I'm going to advance it west toward Thorn, where it will then threaten to cut East Prussia off from the rest of Germany by advancing north. That should keep the forces on Danzig and this general area off balance and prevent them from striking south. In addition to that, the First Army is going to advance straight across Eastern Prussia, again forcing the Germans to choose between one force or the other. Now, historically, they defeated the Russians in detail, and I am exposing myself to that possibility to some extent. But the idea would be if they're going to strike east against us, that's going to be taking them away from the main threat, being Berlin. If they're going to strike south against the Second Army, the Third Army may be able to turn and provide support if necessary. So again, 2 armies advancing on Berlin, the Second providing flank cover, and then the 1st moving west, and if the Germans don't strike east against it, coming into unison with the 2nd Army. Again, that really opens us up to the sort of historical Tannenberg-Masurian lakes, but rather than advancing north into this marshland, instead I'm going to advance into these woods and then advance west to try and stay out of this nightmarish territory. Additionally, I'm going to try and use my cavalry of the 2nd Army to cut off German supplies in eastern Prussia. At the very least, it should provide a bit of a diversion and, a bit of a distraction from the Germans. So the first thing I'm going to do with the 2nd Army is I'm going to go ahead and order the 2nd Army to move on Thorn. You can see it's going to take 42 days, so it's going to take some time. Now, every turn is, I believe, 14 days. I think it's a 2-turn cycle, so we're going to theoretically get to Allenstein here in the next turn and then be in eastern Prussia, and then, maybe get to Osterode the following turn and Thorn the turn after that. So 3 turns. The first turn, these guys are locked. Thorn may already be secured by the 3rd Army. If it is, these guys will just move in, essentially, and guard the flank of the 3rd as it shifts west. But in addition to that, and this may be unwise because I only have 1 cavalry unit in here, as far as I can tell. I've got a couple other army corps here, but I don't see, doesn't look like there's cavalry units in here, so I'm kind of a little bit short on cavalry. But what I am going to do is I'm going to take the cavalry division here in the second Army, and I'm actually going to ride this unit into Allenstein per the other guys. Why does it say 25 days? No, you're not. Okay. Going to ride them into Allenstown, but then they're actually going to shift north. They're going to ride through Tannenberg, and then they're going to ride through Brausberg. And the idea here is for these cavalry to, the infantry is going to advance to Allenstein, which is going to cut this rail line, which feeds east toward Festing Lorzen. And then they're going to ride north to Tannenberg, taking a second hex of railroad, ripping that up. And then in Brausberg, in 2 weeks' time, they can cut the other rail line that feeds eastern Prussia. So this cavalry can hopefully cut off supplies, easy supplies. I think they can bring supplies in by sea, but cut off easy transport from eastern Prussia. That's the idea of this cavalry division. That will then make it easier on the 1st Army under Rennenkampf to advance west, hopefully, and link up with the other main forces, taking most of eastern Prussia in its stead. That's the idea. That's the intent. We'll see what this does. Dude with the cool hat is cavalry. Which dude with the cool hat? This guy? Oh, yeah. So it's not our entire cavalry force. I was incorrect. We've got a cavalry corps with 2 so okay, we're not going to completely abandon our cavalry from the 2nd Army, and I'm going to keep some of those with them because we need some eyes and ears moving through hostile enemy territory. Meanwhile, on the eastern Prussian front, Rennenkampf is going to advance on Gumdumdium. I don't know how you pronounce that, but he's going to advance on Gumdumdium. I just like that name. I'm going to keep saying Gumdumdium. And then he's going to do something similar with his cavalry division, one of his independent cavalry divisions, which is going to advance north on Rosenberg. We'll have to go ahead and not have him go that way. He's going to advance north on Rosenberg, which is friendly territory, so he should be able to do that quickly. Then move to Drobang, and then move to Memel. Ideally, if there's no German garrison there, Memel will fall, securing the flank of Rennenkampf up to the point of the sea. Meanwhile, the 27th Army Corps is going to advance south to Solwicki, and then into Goldzap. Again, it'll take 26 days to do that, but it'll advance south, securing Rennenkampf's left flank, and then advance west into Prussia. Meanwhile, the 1st Army will advance on its own. It will take 14 days, and it will advance there. And then we're actually going to take one more corps. We're going to take the 1st Army Corps, and we're going to advance them to Tarjogen, or however you pronounce that, which will take 22 days. And then they're going to advance into Wailu. And the rationale behind this is I want to try and limit the Germans' ability to raid Russia with their own cavalry. So I'm assuming the German cavalry and other forces in eastern Prussia are locked for a little bit of time, so the first turn shouldn't be too risky. But if the Germans get cavalry into our rear and they really start tearing up our railroad lines, that could really hinder our ability to effectively launch an offensive. So the idea is while these German troops are hopefully locked up and not able to move, we'll move some troops in on both flanks to secure our positions, and then we'll try and move forward and keep the pressure on them without allowing them free lanes to advance into Russia and threaten our supplies. So that is the general premise. I don't have any armored trains or anything else like that. Really, all I've got at the moment is 2 armies that can move. One is going to advance its cavalry to the sea, trying to cut the rail line feeding eastern Prussia. The other is going to advance north and then west on Thorn to secure the flank of both the 3rd and the 9th Army, 8th, 9th? 8th armies, the 3rd and the 8th armies, to allow them to drive west. Additionally, when the Warsaw Army, when the 9th Army located at Warsaw is unlocked, this army is actually going to have to swing to Plotrakow, and its goal is going to be to take Breslau, securing the southern flank. So that way, one army will move on Breslau to secure the Austrians from coming up and trying to cut off the Russians driving on Berlin. One army will secure the northern flank at Thorn and potentially drive toward the coast in eastern Prussia here, and 2 armies will drive on Berlin, hoping to take the city with both their flanks secure. That's my overarching strategy. That is my intent, and those are my orders for the first turn. I could do things like raising conscripts and other things like that. So if we go in here, we can spend some money purchasing new units. At the moment, I'm not sure. I think maybe what we'll do... Actually, it doesn't even look like we can raise any of these troops yet. I don't see anywhere on the map. Well, some of them we can. We can raise mountain brigades. I don't really want to raise mountain brigades, though. Those are Serbian infantry brigades. I can't forget about Serbia, by the way. So these are all Serbians. We've got some Caucasus brigades. Why can't they just be standard Russian infantry? All right, there they are. We've got some additional reinforcements and things like that that we could raise. I'm going to hold off for this first turn, because honestly, I don't really know. I don't think one turn will make a huge difference in terms of our strategies there, and I don't know what the best course of action will be to follow here until I've got a better sense of what's going on. Meanwhile, that does bring us to the Serbian frontier. Once we take a look here, if we go to the Serbian front, we control these forces as well. Most of the Serbian army is locked into place. You can see quite a few locks here, and we've got a couple of units that we can issue orders to. Oh, by the way, I didn't issue any orders like synchronizing our marches or whatever. You can do that when you have forces that are moving. You can synchronize their movements. For example, if you go to the Special Orders tab, you can do things like entrench. You can do things like split units. You also have some combat orders, which allow you to enter structures, synchronize movements. I don't think we're going to do that for this particular turn. Synchronization at the moment is not critical so much as haste is, so I'm going to allow these guys to move at their own pace. I want the cavalry to get out here as quick as possible. I want the cavalry to get to the Prussian coast as quickly as possible. I want these infantry units to move as fast as possible. I don't think the Germans have any troops directly on the border, so I think we're safe from a attack on the first turn, or at least that's my assumption here. Meanwhile, on the Serbian front, I think I've got to kind of stand in place. I didn't issue any orders on these troops in terms of like their combat orders. So the cavalry is going to maintain a, let's see here, a offensive posture. I'm not going to go with an all-out attack, but they'll maintain an offensive posture. They'll have a conservative attack as their orders, and is there like an option to destroy railways? I thought there was. I'd have to take a look at that. I could have sworn there was... Oh wait, destroying buildings. Destroy rail. So we're going to issue their order to destroy railways for these cavalry units, which will help them hopefully do what they're supposed to do and raid these German positions here. So that's really the only special order I have for them. The infantry, I think, will kind of have them follow a moderately aggressive and offensive posture. Well, we can't change that, actually. We can order them to hold at all costs. Actually, let's just do defend. I don't want them to hold at all costs. Meanwhile, the 1st Infantry, stuck on its defensive posture, and it's just standard defensive positions. So we can't change any of that right now. If we go to the Serbian front, I'm really not going to move anything. I don't have a good sense of what the Rush or the Austrians have where. There's obviously an army here forming. I don't want to invade Austria. So I think what we do is we just go ahead and tell these guys to stay in a defensive posture and to hold at all costs. And I think that's going to go for all of these troops here within the Serbian army. All of their orders are going to be hold at all costs against the enemy troops here. All right, so do we have a march to the sound of the guns option? I think that may just be something that kind of happens based on your commanders. Doesn't look like we've got a sort of whole, or I don't see that we have an option to march to the sound of the guns, but ideally, like, if one of these guys gets attacked, the other will come support. Okay. So I don't know here. I don't know what my problem is. I have no idea what the Austrians have here. I'm not going to abandon Belgrade, that's for sure. But maybe actually, if we're going to be on the offensive, maybe now that I think about it, we want to advance on the town of Zorink. We don't have a lot of troops to do so. We've only got like 300 firepower, and that's if these two armies attack in unison. It's going to take us quite a bit of time. One of these armies could move in 12 days. The other army would take 20. Doesn't look like they can move directly across the river here. They've got to move south first. I suppose we could try and force march them. Well, they're not. There's no stack. Yeah, I don't have a force march option. I don't know. It doesn't look like I have the ability to hit these guys quite yet. These guys can get there, but I have no idea how strong the Austrians are. Huh. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't launch an attack there. I've got to hold these guys in place. This unit isn't really doing any good because there's a river here. So I suppose it's just good in the sense that this unit. But I suppose it's good in the sense that if these guys get attacked, if the Austrians go one or the other, they can march to the sound of the guns. So actually, let's have these guys in more of a defensive stance. And these guys on a hold at all costs. I can't attack here without some reconnaissance about what these guys have. Not on turn one. We'll see how this all works out, but I don't want to attack the enemy as Serbia. It's tempting, but there's just too much. There's too much I don't know, and I think our best bet is to hold in Serbia. Serbia has some very good defensive terrain, especially around Belgrade. The Serbians held off a really long time against the Austrians, so I think that's going to be our best bet, is to follow that course of action. So that being said, guys, those are our tactics here. The first army is going to start its movements and getting into position here in Eastern Prussia. The second army will begin as well, and next turn we'll have a whole bunch of new units coming online for our orders. So what I'll do here is I'm going to go ahead and save my turn, and then offline I will go ahead and submit the turn to XTRG for it to be executed, and then we'll have our next video, which looks at our following turn, as well as the results for our first turn. Next week, Wednesday, is when I'm planning to have it up. We may shift into a period where there are 2 turns per week, but at least initially it's going to be 1 turn every Wednesday. 8 in the morning, Central Standard Time is when these videos will post, and I hope you guys enjoy. Always feel free to leave comments, thoughts, recommendations down below. The only thing I will ask is, if you are watching both XTRG's stream and my own stream, please do not provide any sort of advice or give me any insight into what XTRG is doing. Likewise, I would ask that you not share this information with XTRG. We want to make sure that we are fighting fairly and not getting insights that we shouldn't have. But until next time, guys, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.